Section on solving systems of equations. This section will be over using the substitution method to solve systems of equations. Remember, as we solve these, we're looking for an ordered pair, an XY ordered pair that works for both equations. And this method involves getting one of the variables by itself. And so as I look at both of these, I got to figure out which one I think is going to be easiest to get a variable by itself. I'm probably not going to want to solve for x here because there's a 3 that's being multiplied by it, and over here I'm not going to want to solve for x because there's a 2 by it. Now both y's work. Here if I get rid of the 2x though, I have negative y, whereas here if I get rid of the 3x, I just have a positive y. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of the 3x. To do that, I just subtract 3x. And so your first goal each problem is to get one of the variables by itself. It does not matter which equation it's from, it does not matter what variable it is, but you want to get one of the variables by itself. Here's where the substitution method comes into place. I know that y equals 5 minus 3x. That's what it equals. Y is equal to 5 minus 3x. And so when I come over here and I go to do my problem, instead of using the y, I'm going to put in there what y equals. Remember, y is 5 minus 3x. And so where the y is, before I was subtracting y, now instead I'm going to subtract 5 minus 3x. Now it's important to put it in parentheses on this particular problem because that negative here is not just going to the 5. We're not just subtracting the 5. We're subtracting 5 minus 3x. And so as we've done before, we have to make sure we bring that into both of them. And so I have 2x minus 5, negative 1 times negative 3. That's a positive. So it's plus 3x equals 10. Now combine what we can combine here. So combine like terms here. I have 2x and 3x. That's 5x. I'm taking away the 5, and that's equal to 10. Add your 5. Divide by 5. And x equals 3. So now I know what x is. I know that x is 3. Now I actually use the substitution method again. I know that x is 3, so I come back over to this one, and I substitute in the fact that I know now that x is 3. So I go through and do the math. 3 times 3 is 9, so I have 5 minus 9. 5 minus 9 is negative 4. Now, just doing this is the work you have to do to actually find the answer. To actually display the answer, what we want to do is we want to actually write it as an ordered pair. And so again, our answer will always be an ordered pair that works for both of them. And so if I went back in, I could plug in 3 negative 4 for 3x plus y equals 5, and it would work. And I could plug in 3 negative 4 for 2x minus y equals 10, and it would also work. And so this is the solution to the system. Now, we will also be doing story problems that involve this as well. So here's a quick story problem. A cell phone company sells 2 types of cell phones. They charge $150 for one of the phones and $225 for the other. If the company sold 22 cell phones for a total of $3,900 last month, how many of each type were sold? And so the important part is that we start looking at what's happening here. And as you look at it, there's 2 kind of situations going on here. One of them is talking about money, and the other one is talking about how many cell phones there are. And so let's just say there's 2 types of cell phones here. Let's call one type of cell phone X, and let's call the other cell phone Y. Total, there are 22 cell phones. And so however many there are of the X kind, and however many kind there are of the Y kind, total, there are 22. So I don't know how many of each there are, but I know that x plus y is equal to 22. And I know that when you take 150 times x, that's how much money it's going to cost for these x cell phones, plus the 225 for each of the y ones. That's how much it's going to cost for all those y cell phones. Total, when I add them all together there, I get 3,900. So again, we have to go through and we actually have to get one of the variables by themselves. And so I got to go through and get one of the variables by themselves. Obviously over here, this isn't going to be where you're going to want to go to get a variable by itself. You're going to want to go to this right here. I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to get rid of the y here and get x equals 22 minus y. And so as I come over here, I know that x now is 22 minus y. And so where the x is, I'm going to substitute that in. So I have 150 times 22 minus y, plus I still have the 225y, and I still have the 3,900. Now as I go through, remember I have to multiply this into both of them. And so as I do that, here I get 3,300 minus 150y plus 225y equals 3,900. And so as I come back here, I have the 3,300 is still here. I have plus here. When I combine the y's, I have 75y. And I still have the 3,900. I have to get rid of the 3,300. And eventually I get 75y is equal to 600. Now I do have to go through and divide by 75 and divide by 75. And I find out how many of these cell phones I actually have. And as you look at it, it ends up being that I have 8 cell phones of this kind. Now if I have 8 of these Y kinds, then I can come over here. Y is 8. I have 8 of these Y kinds. So if Y is 8, 22 minus 8, then I'm going to have 14 of the other kind. And so again, I have 14 of the X kind. I have 8 of the Y kind. Now, if I have labels here, I should use labels since it is a story problem. I have 14 X cell phones, and I have 8 of these Y cell phones. And so make sure we get labels on there. Make sure that we go through and that we check our work to make sure that it makes sense that we could have 8 and 14 cell phones. Class, so remember, when solving systems of equations using substitution, the first thing you need to do is find one of the variables to isolate. And so you isolate a variable. Then substitute that variable into the other equation that you haven't worked with yet. And once you substitute into that other equation, that will be the only variable in that equation. So since that's the only variable in the equation, you can then isolate that variable again. When you do this, you'll get an answer like y equals 4 or x equals 3 or something like that. Whatever you get, go back and substitute that into the first equation that you started with. And you should already have it solved down so that the first equation says something like, y equals 3 plus x. And then all you'll have to do is substitute in the x into that. And so remember those steps as you go through it. As with other lessons I've done, I like to end it by thinking about different things that have happened. And today I want to talk about long time ago when people were starting to name things. And the first person to name it was probably thinking, well, this is going to be easy. And someone put this in front of them and they thought, well, that's easy. It's orange. I'll call it an orange. Do you think at any time, though, he thought, what if something else that's orange gets put in front of me? For instance, what happens when this gets put in front of me? Do you think at any time he thought to himself that maybe he should have called it long pointy thing instead of maybe carrot? I don't know. And at what point did someone see this and think to themselves, you know what I'm going to call that? Bacon. Why didn't they just say awesome?